Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone who has taken the time to appear in Canberra. I apologise for not being there in person. Like many on the committee, we have electorate commitments we're popping in and out of. Governor Lowe, like the others, can I thank you for your professionalism, your service to our nation and your graciousness to your staff and to your incoming replacement, Ms Bullock, who I also congratulate and look forward to working with you when you take over in September.
Thank you.
Governor Lowe, my questions will, I think, all be to you, but please feel free to hand off to someone else. The first few questions are about housing. There has been an unexpected uplift in housing prices, and certainly in the forecasts, again, we've seen that this week. How do you explain that unexpected lift in the forecast of house prices?
Good question. It's also something that's being seen elsewhere in the world. So when I meet with my colleagues, we talk about this. Two factors I think stand out. The first is the change in the population dynamics. The population of Australia is up 2.5% this year. As I said before, the number of dwellings is up 1.5%. So strong demand relative to supply, rents go up, and when rents go up, prices tend to go up. So that's one important factor. A second is that there's a understandable perception in the community that the peak of interest rates is either now or close at hand. And so people are saying, well, if I can afford the current rate of repayments, and as long as I keep my job, there's going to be strong demand for housing going forward, and it's a good time to buy property. So that's, I'm not providing financial advice, but that's the perception that many people have, that the interest rate peak is near or at hand. So now's the time to get in. I think the third factor, which is important, is that the nominal income in the economy has been rising quickly because of inflation. And when inflation's high, the prices of everything go up, including the price of housing. So you put population growth, the perceptions about interest rates, and the fact that nominal income is growing quickly. And when people's nominal income are growing quickly, some people are suffering difficult financial circumstances, but others are doing reasonably well, and they're deciding to invest their capital in housing, and the prices go up. So that's the best explanation we've got at the moment. Looking forward, we're expecting the unemployment rate to rise a bit, so that could change the dynamics in the housing market. Traditionally, when unemployment's been rising, housing prices have softened, so that could happen. And we're expecting nominal income growth to slow. So population growth isn't expected to stay at 2.5%. There's kind of a rebound when the borders reopened, and that rebound, I think, has almost run its course. So there are a lot of factors there.
Thank you, Governor. That was a comprehensive and helpful list. When you were asked about that, I think in another question, you noted that mismatch between the 2.5% population increase and the stock of housing at 1.5%, and I think you said it was really up to Parliament as to how you deal with that. When you said really up to Parliament, do you mean in the sense that the two sides of the equation, population primarily on the federal Parliament through immigration levers, but also the state parliaments in terms of supply? Is that what you meant by leave it up to Parliament?
Yeah, if I said it up to Parliament, I should have said leave it up to governments, because it's local government as well, and
Yes.
I know the federal government doesn't have very many levers on the housing supply issue. It has but it has some, but not many. I think the real issues lie with local and state governments. And population growth, the surge that we've had over the past year, a large part of it is students and young people coming back into the country. So that's, in the longer term, that's good for us. But we need to find the ability to house people, and I think that's flexibility on the supply side over time. So
Thank you.
I wouldn't like my comments to be taken as, well, it's kind of a mistake to allow kind of the students and backpackers and holidaymakers to come back, because that's not the problem. The problem is the flexibility of the supply side of the housing market. And governments can do something about that.
And further to that unexpected rise, how does that affect the bank's forecasts of consumption? And is there a recalibration of tightening needed based on that metric alone?
The fact that housing prices are rising again means household wealth, as measured, goes up. And when household wealth goes up, people spend a bit more, at least in aggregate. That's the historical relationship. So that is one of the factors that's underpinning the stronger growth in the economy as we go into next year and into 25, is that there's likely to be a positive wealth effect. And we've factored that into the lift in economic growth next year. Having factored that in, we still think we can travel that narrow path of inflation coming down. So it hasn't required in and of itself a recalibration of the trajectory of interest rates, because there are other things going on, but at the margin, higher housing prices create more wealth, and people tend to spend out of wealth over time.
Thank you. When we had the Big Four bank CEOs before this committee, one of the dominant themes was their assessment of resilience, and you used that word here today. Are you still worried about the fixed rate mortgage cliff, or do people seem to be adjusting to the higher repayments?
We're watching it carefully. I mean, as I said, 1 million borrowers have kind of already transitioned, and there are 1 million still to come. What we know from the banks about the 1 million that have transitioned is that when they transition, they haven't fallen behind on their housing loans at any greater rate than people on variable rate loans. So their performance is pretty much the same, and the banks have also provided us with some data that their spending on goods and services is pretty much the same. I think there are a few reasons for that. The first is this transition from a low fixed rate loan to a variable rate loan has been the most telegraphed increase in mortgage repayments ever. People have known this is coming, and many people, not everyone, many people have prepared for it. They knew their mortgage repayments were going to go up a lot, and they started saving a bit more, squirreling a bit more away where they could. And so when they actually make the transition, they're better prepared because they've saved a bit more. There are some people who used the period of very low interest rates to increase their spending and didn't prepare, and they're obviously finding things more difficult. But the vast bulk of Australians are sensible. They understood this was coming, and they've prepared for it. And the banks, by and large, help people prepare for it. I know a number of the banks have individually called people who are making the transition, talking about their transition path and plan, and have worked with them. So to date, it's gone smoothly. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be problems down the track, but to date, it's gone pretty smoothly. You've got to remember these borrowers did benefit for 2 or 3 years of an extraordinarily low level of interest rates, and some use that benefit to put money away in a bank deposit or somewhere else, and can now use that money either to pay down their loan or to help support their consumption.
Thank you, Governor. In the committee, when we heard from the Big Four banks after resilience, the next thing that jumped out as a theme was the mismatch by age in terms of discretionary spending. And you made the valid observation that you don't have to have a mortgage to be feeling pain at the moment, and it doesn't matter what age you are. But on average, it appears from the data from the banks that people under 55 have pulled back a lot more on discretionary spending than those over 55. That resilience on average for those aged over 55, does that have an impact on your assessment of the disproportionate impacts of rate rises?
Well, the impact of rate rises is uneven across the community. I mean, there are people, some of whom write to me, welcoming higher interest rates because they get more interest income. For many years, I'd got letters from people bemoaning the low level of interest rates because particularly retirees. They were relying on interest income, and the interest rate was zero, so they weren't getting any income. And now they're getting more income, and if you own your house outright, the house price is going up, so your wealth is increasing, the value of financial assets is rising, and you're getting more interest income. So there are people who are benefiting from the higher interest rates, and other people are in a lot of pain because of the higher interest rates. So there is this dispersion, and we do our best to take that into account and try and understand it. But I just want to repeat a point I made earlier because I think it's really important. Everyone is hurting from high inflation. In fact, most people's real income in the country went down last year. So that means their ability to buy goods and services went down. The price level went up by more than people's incomes. And that hurts everybody. So that's, we can over time we'll fix that by getting inflation back down. The way we fix it does have these distributional effects across the economy. And we understand that, and we try and take it into account as best we can.
Thank you, Governor. I think there's furious agreement about that point. I have one final question before I hand back to the Chair. And I apologise if this has been asked. I had to pop in and out. The RBA's growth forecasts were downgraded this year through to December from 0.9 from 1.2%. Yeah. What were the reasons behind that drove that change?
Perhaps I can hand to Marianne, because she's the keeper of the forecasts.
Yeah. Thank you. So the two key drivers for this year, and this was a near-term downgrade, not a massive one, is consumption growth. Consumption growth has been a bit slower than had been expected, so it's come earlier, the slowing. And the other one is dwelling investment. There are well-known problems in that sector, that they've got a large pipeline of work to go through, but have problems finding the right labour in some of the trades. And so we keep on being a little bit surprised that that large pipeline just takes that little bit longer to be worked off. And that's really the two key margins of adjustment that can explain that near-term downgrade. But the way I would phrase it is the slowing's come a little bit earlier than we had in previous forecasts.
Oh, thank you, and thank you, everyone. And Governor Lowe, I wish you the very best in what comes next. As a private citizen, you're welcome to write many letters and emails to all of us about what you think we should be doing. But we wish you and your family the very best from here.
Thank you, and I look forward to returning to be a private citizen again too.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Wallahan. Mr. Charlton, or Dr. Charlton.